I learned my parents gave the family real estate empire to my sister. I stopped working 80-hour weeks for free. A week later, Dad called panicked about losing our biggest client. I just said, let Lena handle it. She's the heir, right? My name is Ethan. I'm 32 years old, and I live in San Francisco. It's been 10 years since I first walked through the glass doors of Falcon Properties, my family's real estate company, and let myself believe that if I worked hard enough, I'd eventually earn my place at the table. I used to think there'd be a moment, a final day of reckoning, when my father would finally see me. See all the late nights, the endless cups of coffee gone cold at my desk, the bloodshot eyes, and the stress headaches I shrugged off so I could keep the company's projects on track. That moment never came. It was just past midnight when I looked up from my computer, the city lights twinkling through the office windows like cold stars. The takeout container on my desk was cold, half-finished noodles that tasted like cardboard. My shoulders ached from hunching over code for hours, debugging yet another data issue in our new property management software. My father always said, a real man never complains about hard work. So I didn't. Not when I missed holidays. Not when I watched Lena, my younger sister, float from one luxurious retreat to the next, her life a carefully curated Instagram feed of beach sunsets and spa days. Meanwhile, I was here, night after night, my skin pale under the office lights, telling myself that if I kept going, if I didn't quit, he'd notice. He'd say, I'm proud of you, son. You're the reason Falcon Properties stands so strong. But he never did. The phone rang, and I glanced at the caller ID. Dad. My pulse kicked up, my throat going dry. I picked up. Ethan, how's it going? He said, like it was any other call, his tone casual and measured. It's going, I said. I'm almost done with the new data migration. Should be ready by morning. Good, he said, with that same distant approval he'd always had for me, like I was just another employee. Listen, don't worry too much. You always land on your feet. I swallowed. I know. That's my boy, he said. I'll see you at the family dinner next week, yeah? Try to take a break now and then. The call ended, and I sat there, staring at the phone, the weight of his words pressing on my chest like a stone. You always land on your feet. A phrase that sounded like encouragement, but felt more like dismissal. Like he expected me to keep running in circles, no matter what. I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my eyes. I remembered all those family dinners where he and Lena would talk about art exhibitions and yoga retreats. While I sat there, my mind still in the office, wondering if the next software update would finally be the one he noticed. But no matter how much I gave, it was never enough. Falcon Properties was my life, my entire identity wrapped up in a company name that didn't even have room for me at the top. And still, I believed. I believed that if I worked hard enough, kept coding, kept fixing problems no one else would touch, one day he'd see me. He'd tell me I mattered. I closed my eyes, the buzz of the office lights filling the silence. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, ready to keep working, even though every muscle in my body begged for rest. This was the pulse of my devotion, a quiet desperation that no one else saw. I took a shaky breath, opened a fresh can of cold brew, and turned back to my screen. Because in my mind, there was always tomorrow, always another chance to prove I was enough. It was a Thursday afternoon when I stumbled across it, the kind of cold, overcast day that seemed to match the low hum of dread in my gut. I was at my desk, half-empty coffee mug beside me, sorting through decades of historical sales records for a Falcon Properties audit. I had been in the archives for hours, clicking through ancient spreadsheets, verifying sales from before I even joined the company. My eyes were tired, my fingers numb from all the data entry, but I kept going. Because that's what I did. I kept going, no matter how thankless the task. Then I saw the file. It wasn't even labeled clearly, just a bland file name that didn't belong in the middle of a boring audit folder. Out of habit, I clicked. The screen flickered, loading a PDF. I scrolled down, and my breath caught. Succession plan. A full document, stamped with the Falcon Properties logo. And there, in neat black letters, was the plan for the company's future. My father's signature at the bottom, alongside my mother's. My stomach twisted as I read the names. Lena, sole beneficiary. There was no mention of me. Nothing about my years of work, the software systems I built from scratch, the late nights I spent fixing the accounting errors that kept the business alive. It was as if I didn't exist. My mind went blank for a second, like the words on the page were in a language I didn't understand. I read it again, slower this time, forcing myself to absorb every line. Lena would inherit everything. She, the one who treated Falcon Properties like a personal piggy bank. She, who never once spent a night here sweating over system errors and tenant disputes. And me? Nothing. The room seemed to shrink around me. My skin felt too tight, my breath ragged. I thought of all the nights I worked until dawn. The Christmas Eve I spent alone in this office debugging the lease system while Lena posted pictures from some ski resort. The birthdays I missed. The friends I stopped seeing because I was too busy holding this company together. For what? I printed the document. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it when it came out of the tray. I folded it carefully, methodically, like I was holding something precious. But it wasn't precious. It was a knife. I put it in the bottom drawer of my desk and locked it with a slow, deliberate turn of the key. Then I just sat there, staring at the drawer. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. I didn't know how long I stayed like that. It felt like hours. My mind was a carousel of all the times I believed my father's empty praise, All the times I told myself that my work was enough, that one day they'd see me, but they never did. They never would. When I finally stood up, I felt like a ghost in that office. Like every moment I'd spent there was some illusion I'd been clinging to. All the nights I thought I was building a future, when really, I was just a placeholder. A warm body to keep the machine running until Lena decided to show up and claim it. I walked out of that office, the air cold and damp in my lungs. I didn't even bother to turn off the lights. Let them burn all night. Let them burn forever. Because in that moment, I knew that everything I'd given them meant nothing. And the only person who could decide what came next was me. A week later, I found myself sitting at the dinner table in my parents' house, the smell of rosemary chicken and roasted potatoes heavy in the air. My mother fussed over the place settings, and Lena was chattering away about her latest art retreat in Sedona. But all I could think about was the folder in my messenger bag, the one with the succession plan inside. I waited for the right moment, for everyone to be seated, for the conversation to settle into the usual safe topics. My father was at the head of the table, his plate already half empty. My mother was pouring herself another glass of Chardonnay. Lena was scrolling through her phone, not even pretending to care about the meal. I cleared my throat. I need to talk to you all about something. My father barely looked up. Can it wait? We're trying to have a nice dinner. No, I said, my voice steady. It can't wait. Lena rolled her eyes. Ethan, can't you just let it go for one night? I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder, sliding it across the table until it rested in front of my father. I found this on the company server, I said. It's the new succession plan. The air went still, the clink of cutlery and the hum of small talk gone in an instant. My father didn't even reach for the folder at first. He just looked at me, his expression blank. You weren't supposed to see that, he said finally, his voice low and calm. I swallowed hard. So it's true? Lena gets everything? Lena let out a laugh, short and sharp. Ethan, don't be so dramatic. It's just business. Business. My voice cracked a little. I gave everything to that company. 10 years of my life. And you're telling me it's just business to cut me out without even talking to me about it. My father sighed, like I was an inconvenience he'd been hoping to avoid. Ethan, you've always been the steady one. You'll land on your feet, like you always do. Lena, she needs this more than you do. I felt the words like a slap. She needs this? She hasn't done a damn thing for Falcon Properties. Lena smirked, swirling her wine glass. Oh, come on. Don't act like you're surprised. You're good at the boring parts, coding, spreadsheets, whatever. But the future of the company is about image, about relationships. And you, well, you're not exactly the face of Falcon Properties. My hands clenched around the edge of the table. What does family even mean to you? Because I thought it meant standing together, not selling each other out. My father didn't flinch. Family means doing what's best for everyone. And this is what's best. My mother opened her mouth to speak, but the words caught in her throat. She just looked away, her eyes wet and distant. I stood up. My chair scraped against the hardwood floor, loud in the sudden silence. I see, I said, my voice almost calm now. You made your choice. Now I'm making mine. Lena laughed again, the sound cold and brittle. Don't be so melodramatic, Ethan. It's not like you're going to quit. I looked her dead in the eye. Watch me. For a moment, no one said anything. My father just stared at me, his jaw tight. My mother looked down at her plate. And Lena, she looked amused. Like this was all some minor inconvenience she'd already forgotten. I picked up my bag and walked out, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might split my chest. I didn't look back, because I knew if I did, I might lose the last shred of resolve I had left. As I stepped into the cold night air, I realized that this was it. No more begging for approval. No more hoping they'd see me. They never would. The day after that dinner, I walked into Falcon Properties for what would be the last time. My steps echoed in the quiet hallways, the familiar squeak of my worn-out office chair greeting me like a half-forgotten friend. I paused for a moment at the doorway, taking in the stacks of project files, the software updates blinking on my screen, the reminders of a decade's worth of work. Then I started to pack. I moved slowly at first, sorting through everything I'd built here, my custom scripts, my patch fixes, the frameworks that held the company together even when no one else noticed. I gathered them all, copied them onto a hard drive. The digital DNA of the work I had poured my life into. I didn't want to take anything that wasn't mine, but I wasn't going to leave my blood and sweat behind either. I deserved at least that much. Mr. O'Connor, my mentor and the company's former lawyer, had been waiting for me in the small conference room near the elevators. He was the one person here I trusted, the only one who ever looked at me like I was more than just the guy in the back office. He stood when I walked in. Ethan, he said, his voice calm and steady. I hear you're finally doing what you should have done a long time ago. I sank into the chair across from him, feeling the weight of the decision settle into my bones. I thought if I kept working, if I just kept pushing, it would matter, that they'd see me. My throat tightened, but I forced the words out. But they never saw me at all. Mr. O'Connor gave me a small, understanding smile. Families like this one, they only see what they want to see. And they saw you as a tool, nothing more. I nodded slowly. I'm done being their tool. He reached across the table, placing a worn hand over mine. Then let it be done. Ethan, you don't owe them anything anymore. I took a deep breath, then pulled out my phone. My resignation email was already drafted, short and direct. No flowery words, no explanations, just a single sentence. I hereby resign from Falcon Properties, effective immediately. I hit send, and just like that, It was over. I walked back to my office, each step feeling lighter than the last. I gathered the last of my things, my coffee mug, a framed photo of the city skyline I'd taken on a rare afternoon off. My father's voice echoed in my head. You always land on your feet. And for once, I realized he was right, because I wasn't landing on their feet anymore. I paused at the door one last time, taking it all in. The place where I'd spent so many nights, telling myself that it would all be worth it. But it wasn't, and it never would be. Mr. O'Connor walked me out to the lobby. We didn't say much. He understood the weight of this without words. At the door, he squeezed my shoulder lightly. I'm proud of you, Ethan. Don't ever let them tell you otherwise. I managed a small smile. Thank you. I stepped outside into the cold San Francisco air, the wind biting at my cheeks. My phone buzzed in my pocket with a dozen new messages, but I didn't look. I didn't care. For the first time in 10 years, I didn't have anywhere to be. No deadlines, no frantic last-minute fixes. Just me, and the knowledge that I was finally free. I walked away from Falcon Properties without a single glance back, each step steady and sure. Because sometimes you have to let everything burn down to find your own path. It didn't take long for the phone calls to start. The morning after I resigned, my phone lit up with the first wave of messages. My father's name on the caller ID, then my mother's, then Lena's, one after another, like a desperate orchestra of voices that had never truly listened to me. I ignored them all. I spent that day walking along the Embarcadero, feeling the salt air on my skin, watching the ferries come and go, the tourists snapping photos, oblivious to the panic playing out in my family's world. It felt like a small luxury, my own private moment of peace. But the next day, the calls got worse. Ethan, please. My mother's voicemail crackled, her voice frantic and trembling. You're being unreasonable. Falcon Properties needs you. Your father, he's not well. Just come back and talk to us. I deleted the message without listening to the rest. Then it was Lena. Ethan, this is childish. Do you really want to see everything you've worked for just collapse? You can't do this to us. I almost laughed at that, as if I hadn't spent 10 years doing everything for them. By the third day, the calls turned into guilt trips. My father left a voicemail, his tone icy but tinged with desperation. Ethan, you're making a mistake. This isn't how you handle family problems. You think you're proving a point? You're just showing how selfish you can be. I let his words sit there, hollow and empty. The same old script, the same tired performance. But it wasn't until a week later that the real panic bled through. I was at a small cafe, nursing a bitter cup of black coffee, when my phone rang again. My father's voice was different this time. There was no calm, no control. Ethan, please, he blurted out, breathless. The Anderson deal, it's falling apart. They're threatening to pull out. We can't afford to lose this client. You know how to fix this. You're the only one who can. I ended the call. My thumb hovered over the block button for a moment, but I didn't press it. Part of me wanted to hear them squirm, to let them see what it felt like to be powerless. I went home to my small apartment, a place that suddenly felt more like mine than it ever had before. I let the calls keep coming, each one another reminder of how deep they had buried me in their mess. I let them pile up in my voicemail, a collection of frantic apologies and last-ditch attempts at manipulation. Lena tried to sound casual in her messages, but I could hear the strain in her voice. Ethan, come on. This is just a misunderstanding. You're overreacting. Let's just fix it, okay? Let's sit down and figure this out. But there was nothing to figure out. There was nothing left for me there. For years, I'd been their insurance policy, their fixer, their safety net. And now, they were flailing without me. And I felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, just relief. I turned off my phone that night, slipped it into the drawer beside my bed, and lay back in the dark. The city was quiet outside, the soft hum of cars on the street below. For the first time in years, I wasn't anyone's lifeline, and it felt like breathing fresh air. I didn't plan to go back to my childhood home. But a week after the final call from my father, I found myself standing in front of that old, faded green door, the smell of jasmine from my mother's garden as familiar as the creak of the porch boards. I had come to get my things, the last of what was mine, boxes of childhood keepsakes, an old guitar I hadn't played in years, maybe a few books I'd left in the attic. I told myself I was here to tie up loose ends, but what I found instead was something I hadn't even known was there. I was digging through a box of dusty yearbooks and old report cards when I spotted it, my grandfather's leather-bound journal. It was tucked at the bottom of the box, the leather worn smooth from decades of use. I almost didn't open it, but something in me, some flicker of hope or defiance, pushed me to sit down right there on the dusty attic floor and start reading. My grandfather had been one of the original partners of Falcon Properties, back when it was just a single apartment building and a handshake agreement. He was old school, a man who believed in fairness and accountability. The journal wasn't just filled with his personal thoughts, it had pages of meeting notes, carefully recorded partnership clauses, and his handwritten amendments to the original contracts. And on one of those yellowed pages, in his tight, meticulous script, I found it. A clause I had never seen before. All contributors to Falcon Properties must be fairly compensated and acknowledged in any succession plan, regardless of family ties. No contributor shall be excluded without consent or compensation equal to their contributions. I read it 3 times, my hands shaking. This wasn't just a relic. This was a bombshell. My mind raced back to all the late nights I had spent coding the software that streamlined property management, the endless hours updating tax records and fixing accounts. My name might not have been on the official letterhead, but my sweat and sacrifice were embedded in the very structure of Falcon Properties. And my grandfather had known. He had written this clause to protect people like me, people who worked in the shadows, unseen and unthanked, people who gave everything. I closed the journal and pressed it to my chest, my pulse pounding. In that moment, it felt like my grandfather was reaching across decades to hand me a lifeline. I had spent so long feeling like I didn't belong, like I had no claim to what I had built. But this journal, this clause, proved I wasn't invisible. I wasn't just a placeholder. I was part of the foundation, legally, spiritually, in a way that even Lena and my father couldn't erase. I packed up the journal carefully, sliding it into my messenger bag along with the other scraps of my past. As I walked down the stairs of that old house, I felt taller, stronger. Outside, the sky was bruised purple with dusk. I didn't know what would come next, how the family would react, what lengths they'd go to keep their grip on the empire they thought was theirs alone. But for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like a ghost in someone else's story. I felt like someone who was finally ready to fight back. I didn't waste any time after finding the journal. With Mr. O'Connor's calm guidance and the help of a sharp young lawyer he recommended, I filed for mediation. The clause in my grandfather's journal wasn't just a dusty relic, it was ironclad. And it was my ticket to finally stand toe-to-toe with my family. The mediation was held in a sterile conference room in a downtown office building, the kind of place where secrets crack and truth spills out in the cold light of fluorescent lamps. My father, Lena, and my mother sat on one side of the table, trying to look composed in their tailored suits and soft scarves. I sat across from them, with Mr. O'Connor and my lawyer at my side. No one spoke at first. My father's face was tight, his jaw set in that familiar expression of forced calm. Lena looked annoyed, fiddling with her phone until our lawyer cleared her throat and began to lay out the evidence. We went through everything, my documented contributions to Falcon Properties, the data logs of the software I built, the bank statement showing I'd personally covered key expenses when cash flow was tight. I watched my father's expression flicker, saw Lena's shoulders stiffen. Then my lawyer dropped the final blow. The scans of my grandfather's journal. This clause, she said, tapping the highlighted section with a pen, legally binds Falcon Properties to acknowledge Ethan's contributions. He was not merely an employee, he was an equal contributor, and he is entitled to fair compensation and a stake in the succession plan. Silence fell. My father shifted uncomfortably, his hand closing around his glass of water like it was the only thing anchoring him. Lena tried to laugh it off. Are we really taking some scribbles in an old notebook seriously? This is just, it's sentimental. It doesn't mean anything. Mr. O'Connor leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. It means everything, Lena. Your grandfather's partnership clauses are valid and legally binding. They've been honored in every other family dispute for decades. This is no different. Lena's eyes darted around the room, the first flicker of real panic crossing her face. You can't do this, she said, her voice rising. You're just trying to ruin everything. Ruin everything? I said, my voice calm, cold. All I ever wanted was to be seen, to be treated like I mattered. But you turned me into a ghost, Lena. A ghost who kept your empire running while you played artist in the woods. Lena's face flushed red. Oh, spare me the martyr act. You're so obsessed with your precious coding projects that you don't even know how to talk to people. You're not the future of Falcon Properties, Ethan. You never were. My father tried to jump in, his voice sharp. That's enough, Lena. Let's be reasonable. But Lena wasn't listening. Her panic was spilling out, her words tumbling over each other. You think you're so noble? You think this is about justice? You're just jealous. You've always been jealous because you're nothing but a glorified IT guy. The global corporation representative, there to observe as Falcon's biggest investor, shifted in his seat. He'd said little the entire meeting, but now he cleared his throat. This kind of internal conflict and mismanagement, it's concerning, he said carefully. Very concerning for our future partnership. Lena's face went white. My father let out a long, ragged breath, his hands trembling as he tried to calm her. But it was too late. The truth had come out, ugly, raw, and undeniable. The mediator, a soft-spoken woman in a gray suit, finally stepped in. I think we've seen enough for today, she said. We'll take a short recess and reconvene to discuss next steps. I stood slowly, my legs feeling steady beneath me. Mr. O'Connor gave me a small nod, the faintest smile on his lips. My lawyer packed up her notes, her eyes bright with quiet victory. As I walked out of the room, Lena's voice followed me, a bitter echo in the hallway. You're nothing, Ethan, nothing without us. But I didn't look back, because I knew that I was finally, truly free of them. A month after the mediation, I stood in the back of the courtroom, my hands resting in my pockets, feeling more like an observer than a participant. The judge, an older woman with tired eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, reviewed the final arguments with calm authority. My father sat at the front of the courtroom, his shoulders hunched, his face drawn and pale. Lena fidgeted beside him, her expensive coat looking out of place in the stark, echoing room. My mother sat a few rows back, her eyes darting between me and the floor as if she still couldn't believe how far things had gone. Mr. O'Connor sat at my side, calm as ever, his steady presence a quiet reassurance. The judge's voice cut through the tense silence. Based on the evidence presented, including the binding partnership clauses from the late Mr. Falcon's journals and the substantial documentation of Ethan's contributions. The court rules in favor of Ethan Falcon. I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling the finality of it settle in my chest like a weight lifting. The judge continued, her tone firm. The succession plan naming Lena Falcon as sole heir is hereby declared invalid. Falcon Properties is ordered to compensate Ethan Falcon for his documented contributions and to restructure ownership accordingly. Furthermore, due to the ongoing mismanagement and clear evidence of financial manipulation, Falcon Properties is to be dissolved and liquidated. A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. My father's face went slack with disbelief. Lena's mouth fell open, her carefully applied lipstick suddenly looking garish and out of place. My lawyer spoke softly at my side. It's done, Ethan. I didn't say anything. I just nodded, feeling the cold, clean finality of it sink in. As the court clerk began reading out the formal orders, I glanced at my father. His eyes met mine, not with anger this time, but with something more like resignation. He looked older than I'd ever seen him, defeated in a way he'd never let himself be before. Lena, on the other hand, was already on her phone, probably trying to figure out how to salvage her lifestyle. She didn't seem to understand that there was nothing left to save. When the session adjourned, I stood slowly, turning away from them without a word. My mother reached out as I passed, her voice barely a whisper. Ethan, we can fix this, can't we? I paused for a moment, looking at her. She looked so small in that moment, smaller than I'd ever seen her. I thought about all the years I'd spent trying to earn their love, their approval. All the nights I told myself that if I just worked harder, they'd finally see me. I shook my head. No, I said quietly. We can't. Outside the courthouse, the cold San Francisco air stung my cheeks. The city felt different now, like a place I could finally claim as my own. No more strings. No more endless nights spent at a desk that was never really mine. I didn't watch as my family walked out behind me. I didn't want to see their faces. I didn't need to. I stepped out onto the sidewalk, the noise of traffic and the distant cry of seagulls filling the space around me. I was alone, but I didn't feel empty. I felt clear. I didn't know exactly what would come next, but I knew one thing for sure. I was done being their shadow, and for the first time in my life, that was enough. The final settlement from Falcon Properties came through a few weeks later, a cold, clinical number on a legal document, but to me, it felt like something more. Proof that I hadn't been invisible after all. I didn't waste any time. I used that money to build something of my own. No more patching up someone else's messes. No more sacrificing my sleep, my sanity, for people who never saw me. I rented a small office in an old brick building in the Mission District. It was nothing like the sterile halls of Falcon Properties, no sleek glass panels or pretentious artwork, just exposed brick, a creaky wooden floor, and a huge window that let in the morning sun. It felt real. It felt mine. I named it Summit Edge Consultancy, a name that spoke to something I'd always wanted, a place where integrity mattered more than appearances, where no one was expected to prove themselves every second of the day. At first, it was just me and my laptop, setting up the framework, reaching out to a few contacts who had always respected my work, even if my family never did. I wasn't sure if anyone would come, but they did. The first was Carla, a marketing specialist who had grown tired of the corporate grind. Then there was Drew, an old colleague from Falcon Properties who said he was done being part of Lena's cult of personality and wanted to work somewhere he could actually make a difference. Within a few months, Summit Edge was a team of 5, small, but strong, and for the first time, the late nights didn't feel like self-punishment. They felt like building something real, brick by brick, with people who wanted the same thing I did. Clients started to notice, too, not just because we got things done, but because we told the truth. We didn't hide behind glossy marketing pitches or phony smiles. We offered real solutions and followed through. Every time. One evening, after everyone had gone home, I sat in that office, the golden glow of the city outside the window, and let myself breathe it all in. The exhaustion was still there. Some things never changed, but it was different now. It wasn't draining me. It was fueling me. And for the first time in years, I wasn't just working to survive. I was working to build something that mattered. Summit Edge wasn't about proving myself to anyone. It was about creating a place where no one had to beg for respect, where loyalty wasn't something you earned by sacrificing your soul. I found real friends here, people who didn't care how fancy my title was or how polished my shoes looked. We were building something honest, something fair. And in that small, warm office, I realized that I had finally stepped out of the shadow of Falcon Properties. My family's empire had crumbled, but from those ashes, I was building something better, something that was finally mine. It was a cold, bright Saturday morning when I saw them again. The community center near my apartment was hosting a neighborhood event, kids running around with painted faces, food trucks parked in a line along the curb, music floating over the chatter of families. I was there because Summit Edge had sponsored the event, a chance to put down real roots in the neighborhood I'd finally claimed as my own. I was talking with one of the event organizers when I saw my parents and Lena walking across the lawn. My father's shoulders were stooped, his hair more gray than I remembered. My mother clutched her purse like a lifeline. Lena was as put together as ever, but there was a tightness around her mouth that hadn't been there before. For a moment, I considered walking away. I didn't owe them anything, not even my presence. but something in me wanted to see it through. To close this chapter, once and for all, they spotted me at the same time. My father's eyes flickered, his mouth opening like he might say something. My mother gave a small, hopeful smile. Lena looked straight at me, her eyes cool and careful, like she was already bracing for what would come next. I stayed where I was. They walked up to me, slow and hesitant, as if they were approaching a stranger. "Ethan," my mother said softly. We didn't expect to see you here." I nodded, my face calm. "I live here now." Lena's jaw tightened, but she didn't say anything. My father cleared his throat. "We wanted to talk. To apologize, I suppose." I let the words hang there for a moment. The old Ethan would have grabbed them, let them fill that empty place inside me that had always wanted their approval. But that Ethan was gone. I looked at them, really looked, and realized they weren't the towering figures of my childhood anymore. They were just people, flawed, selfish, and scared. And that was no longer my problem. "I hear you," I said finally, my voice calm and even. "But I'm not interested in going backward." My mother's smile faltered. "Ethan, we're family, don't you think?" I think," I said quietly, "that you made it very clear what family means to you. And I have my own definition now." Lena looked away, her mouth twisting as if she was about to argue, but she didn't. She just nodded, a tiny movement, her eyes clouded with something I didn't recognize. Regret, maybe, or maybe just the cold understanding that there was no going back. My father looked like he wanted to say more, but he didn't. He just exhaled, a long, heavy breath, and took my mother's hand. They stood there for a moment longer, three people who had once been my whole world, and then they turned and walked away. I watched them go, feeling nothing. No anger, no triumph, just a quiet certainty that I was done. When they were gone, I turned back to the community event. A kid tugged on my sleeve, asking for help with his paper airplane. I knelt down to show him how to fold the wings just right, his laughter bright in the cool morning air. And for the first time in my life, I felt free. Free from their expectations, free from their manipulations, free from the crushing need for their approval. I was just me, Ethan Falcon, builder of Summit Edge, quiet but strong, steady but unshakable. And that was more than enough.